so that we can standardize and all agree upon vulnerabilities, what they are, exact ones, nomenclature, threat level. We have scoring systems. Starting with the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, the CVSS. This is an open framework for communicating the characteristics and impacts of a vulnerability in IT. It uses 3 basic metrics for measuring a vulnerability. It has something called the base metric. That's the inherent quality of the vulnerability. It has the temporal metric, and that's the features that keep changing as the vulnerability goes on in its lifetime. And it has environmental metrics. So these are vulnerabilities based on a particular environment or particular implementation. They have a scoring system from 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, the least likely to do anything to you, 10 being the most severe. And this is stored in the National Vulnerability Database, and you can see here some examples of CVSS. So that brings us up to the National Vulnerability Database. This is run by the U.S. government, by NIST.gov. You can find it at nvd.nist.gov. This is the U.S. government repository of standards-based vulnerability management data. It is based on Security Content Automation Protocol, SCAP. SCAP is basically a mechanism to make sure that your whole network is in compliance with either regulatory requirements or your company requirements. It enables us to automate vulnerability management, because really what CVSS and NVD does, discovered vulnerabilities are quantified, described, given a number, and everybody refers to it the same way. The black hats, the white hats, the security companies, everybody will refer to the same number so that we all have a common language. It seems funny, doesn't it? But we all use it, black hat and white hat alike. We use this so we have the same language and the same point of reference. We know exactly which vulnerability we're talking about. So the NVD aggregates data. It will produce that Common Vulnerability Scoring System. It will produce something called the Common Weakness Enumeration, CWE, and the Common Platform Enumeration. Now, CWE refers to the general weakness of not something specific, but like the weakness of HTTP, okay? It's like the general weaknesses of a particular protocol or service or system or architecture. And then from that, there can be all sorts of vulnerabilities. So this is like the inherent weakness of a particular system, protocol, platform, something. And then the Common Platform Enumeration, this is for particular platforms like Microsoft and Linux and FreeBSD and Android and iOS. NVD, they don't do the actual tests. They're the ones who just gather all this information. Now, the thing that we refer to when we're talking about vulnerabilities, the common thing we use is something called the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, the CVE number. This is an identification system to precisely identify one vulnerability. You can find it at cve.mitre.org, but also NVD. Look at this, search for CVEs. So, and also when we go back, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, they all use CVE numbers. You'll notice if we zoom in that CVE numbers are based on a date stamp. So you'll say CVE dash the year that the vulnerability was discovered and the vulnerability number within that year. So if you look here, here is CVE 2018-8475. That is the 8,475th vulnerability discovered in 2018. And it's not about a particular product, but of all the products that exist, of all the technologies that exist. And then this one here is a specific one, and then there's a description. So it's a remote code execution vulnerability that exists when Windows does not it affects certain operating systems. Then you can see here's another one. Here's CVE 2018-8468. This is privilege elevation under blah, blah, blah conditions affecting certain OSs, etc. Not all of these are operating systems. They can be particular applications or service versions. So when you do vulnerability scanning and pen testing and defense and research, you need to know these scoring systems.